Okay, so get ready, because on this deep dive, we're going back in time to ancient China.
Sounds exciting.
You brought us some selections from the Analects of Confucius, and
Yeah.
hopefully we can glean some timeless wisdom from them. We're working with James Lege's translation,
Okay.
which I have to say has some real zingers in it. It's like,
Right.
just imagine, overhearing these conversations about virtue and leadership, and
hmm
it's like stepping into a whole different world.
It is really remarkable how those ideas from, millennia ago can still
Mhm.
resonate today, isn't it?
Yeah.
Confucius's teachings have had such a profound impact on Chinese thought
Mm.
and culture.
Absolutely. And one of the things that struck me right off the bat was this emphasis on personal development,
Right.
like on striving to be better.
Mm.
There's this one quote that really got me thinking. It says, "Is he not a man of complete virtue who feels no discomposure, though men may take no note of him?"
Wow.
That's deep.
Yeah, it speaks to that Confucian idea
Mm-hmm.
that true virtue is its own reward.
Yeah.
It's not about seeking validation from others, but it's about cultivating this strong inner compass,
Right.
a sense of self that isn't swayed by external opinions.
Yeah.
It's a concept that is as relevant today as it was centuries ago.
Right. It's about being grounded in who you are, regardless of whether you're getting
Exactly.
likes or accolades or whatever,
Correct.
which for a learner like yourself is pretty powerful stuff.
For sure.
And speaking of learning, Confucius was really big on that whole lifelong learning thing.
He was.
He even said that it should be enjoyable. Not gonna lie, sometimes that feels like kind of a tall order.
It does, doesn't it?
Huh?
But that's precisely what makes Confucian thought so enduring.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about rigid rules, but a continual process of self-cultivation.
Okay.
You remember how Confucius reflected on his own life?
Yeah.
He said, at 15, I was passionate about learning. At 30, I found my footing. At 40, I was free from doubts.
Okay.
And at 70, I could follow what my heart desired
Wow.
without overstepping the bounds of what was right.
Mm-hmm.
And it just beautifully illustrates that learning isn't just for the young, but it's a lifelong pursuit.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that journey of self-cultivation brings us to one of the most intriguing ideas in the Analects, the
Yeah.
concept of the superior man, or Junzi.
Right.
Confucius kind of paints this picture of an individual who embodies wisdom, integrity, courage,
Right.
Basically the ultimate role model.
Yeah.
But I have to admit, some of the descriptions kind of threw me off a bit. He stresses humility,
Mm-hmm.
but then there's this whole thing about majestic virtue shining through,
Right.
and it felt kind of contradictory.
Yeah, that's a really astute observation.
Duh.
And it cuts to the heart of what the Junzi represents.
Mm-hmm.
You see, it's not about inheriting some kind of social status
Right.
or being born special or anything like that.
Yeah.
It's about a deep commitment to moral development,
Okay.
a constant striving to align your actions with virtue.
So it's less about outward appearances and more about the inner work.
Precisely. The true measure of a superior man isn't their title or their possessions,
Right.
but it's the strength of their character. And that's where that majesty comes in.
Okay.
It's not about arrogance, but it's the natural radiance of someone who's dedicated themselves to living a virtuous life.
I see.
Think of it like a musician
Okay.
who spent years mastering their craft.
Right.
Their skill just shines through in every note that they play.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So going back to those quotes I mentioned, about leadership,
Mhm.
integrity, inner strength,
Right.
those are all qualities that can be cultivated over time.
Absolutely. Confucius believed that everyone has that potential for greatness within them.
Yeah.
It's about nurturing that potential through self-reflection,
Okay.
education,
Mm-hmm.
and conscious effort.
Yeah.
And this ties in beautifully with the story of the burning stable.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one?
How could I forget?
Right.
It's such a striking image. Confucius rushing to the scene and asking about the people
Right.
before even mentioning the horses.
Exactly. It perfectly encapsulates the priorities of a true leader.
Okay.
Even in a crisis, their first concern is for the well-being of others.
Right.
They lead with empathy and a deep sense of justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's a timeless lesson that's just as relevant in the boardroom as it was in ancient China.
Yeah.
And it makes you think, doesn't it, about how we respond in those moments when the stakes are high.
It really does make you think about that. And that
Yeah.
focus on empathy and right action seems to flow directly into the Analects emphasis on like relationships.
Right.
There's a lot in here about parents and children and
Right.
rulers and their subjects,
Right.
even friends.
Absolutely.
And what's amazing is how relatable it still feels. Yeah.
There's this one passage about maintaining the same respect for a friend,
Right.
even after like years of knowing them.
Right.
Isn't that something we all kind of grapple with sometimes?
It certainly is. We've all experienced the ebb and flow of relationships.
Yeah.
And that's where I think this Confucian concept of lie really comes into play.
Okay.
Now, before you think it's all about like, bowing and scraping or knowing which fork to use at dinner,
Right.
just remember that lie or ritual propriety goes much deeper than just outward appearances.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a spirit of respect,
Mm-hmm.
empathy, and consideration in all of our interactions.
So it's less about following a strict set of rules
Right.
and more about just like approaching relationships with a sense of mindfulness. Exactly. It's about understanding those unspoken codes of conduct that can foster harmony.
Okay.
It's like when you meet your partner's family for the first time,
Yeah.
it's not just what you say,
Right.
but it's your body language, it's your tone of voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's about picking up on those subtle cues and responding with sensitivity.
I see.
And this plays out constantly in the analects,
Okay.
like how to navigate those challenging personalities.
Right.
Remember that passage about putting aside the crooked to make way for the upright?
Yeah.
Or the importance of using words sincerely to like avoid misunderstandings?
Right.
It's all about fostering genuine connection.
That makes sense, but there are times when lies seems to clash with like personal feelings.
Yeah.
Like that passage where Confucius's beloved disciple Yen Yuan passes away. And even in his grief, Confucius refuses to break social decorum by walking in the funeral procession.
Yeah.
It's a bit jarring, honestly.
That passage is fascinating because it reveals those complexities of lie in a hierarchical society.
Okay.
In ancient China, social rituals were deeply intertwined with maintaining order.
Mm-hmm.
And as a model of virtue, Confucius felt obligated to uphold those traditions,
Right.
even in the face of like personal tragedy.
Right.
It wasn't about denying his grief,
Yeah.
but it was about demonstrating the greater good that those rituals represented.
It's like his actions were upholding something larger than himself.
Exactly.
Even in that moment of sorrow.
Precisely. And that tension between personal feelings and social responsibility
Mm-hmm.
is something that I think we still grapple with today, don't we? It's that constant dance between honoring our own emotions
Right.
and recognizing our obligations to the larger community.
So, as we bring this deep dive to a close,
Okay.
what would you say is like the most important takeaway from the Analects for someone who's wanting to learn and grow today?
That's the beauty of the Analects.
Yeah.
It offers a tapestry of wisdom, not a rigid set of rules.
Right.
You know, what resonates most with you as a learner might be very different from what speaks to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
Is it the call to lifelong learning?
Yeah.
Is it the importance of cultivating a virtuous character?
Oh, okay.
Or maybe it's the challenge of approaching all of our relationships with genuine respect and empathy.
Those are all great takeaways.
Right.
And as you said earlier, so much of it comes down to personal interpretation, applying those ancient ideas to our own modern lives.
Exactly. And on that note,
Okay.
I'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
Confucius said, "Recompense injury with justice, and recompense kindness with kindness." It sounds deceptively simple, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But in our messy, complex world,
Right.
how do we define justice and kindness?
Right.
And how do we find that delicate balance between the two when we're faced with, like, real-life situations? Food for thought as you continue your exploration of Confucius and his really, like, enduring legacy.
Awesome. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.